we really invested in trying to make interfaces, whether that's for an operational deployed onboard a ship interface that you see, all the way through to something that someone's ordering their uniform through on their phone. We really tried to focus on utilizing best practices within it and coming up with a standardized design system for defense, which is, industry customer facing, world class from a user perspective.
Welcome to the Digital Customer Communications podcast, where we discover how regulated companies engage, retain, and delight customers at scale. Today, we're talking about scaled digital communications in a slightly different guise, where it's not so much about customers, but personnel, recruits, family members, veterans, and civil servants across the armed forces. We'll see what we can learn about driving accelerated innovation from Morgan Long, Program Manager and Talent Lead at the Defence Digital Foundry, a government initiative designed to fast-track digital transformation in defence. We'll talk about navigating complex compliance requirements and adopting emerging technologies that deliver secure, user-centric solutions at scale. Hi, Morgan.
Good morning, Sam.
Morning. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. So early in the new year, thank you for giving us your time.
No, you're very welcome. Very happy to be here. It's a nice reprieve coming off the back of a bit of a break.
So many people might not know, and it is a bit of a mouthful, the Defence Digital Foundry, what that is. Can you give us a bit of an overview of the Defence Digital Foundry?
Yeah, so if you think about the armed forces, obviously you've got sort of different arms, Army, Navy, Air Force. Within those arms, they've got their own, let's call it accelerators or software houses that manage different softwares and platforms. You then have all of the other areas of defence, which don't necessarily fall into areas that are covered by that. And most of that comes under UK Strategic Command. Within UK Strategic Command, Defence Digital sits. Defence Digital is obviously fairly large. It ranges from everything from satellites through to issuing headsets for your laptop. And what was found very quickly was over the last, I suppose, 5-10 years, some of the new, more modern industry recognized ways of working around particularly software delivery, bringing innovative technologies in and adoption of those technologies needed more of an accelerated, more of a modern way of doing so. So a few years ago with the digital strategy in 2019, it started talking about a digital foundry and a digital backbone, and the Digital Foundry really provides that platform for that innovation and software acceleration. So we get around some of the levels of bureaucracy, or we accelerate and sort of streamline some of the processes around some of the security parameters, which allows us to move at a much quicker pace than some of the other wider, bigger programs, delivering aircraft carriers or new tanks and things like that, for example.
That's a real range of software that you're working on. And it sounds like a real blend of strategic and tactical implementation. In terms of how you do this and what you do on a day-to-day basis, I guess a little bit more pragmatically, what does the team do to enable digital transformation or to enable the acceleration of digital transformation?
So within the Foundry, it breaks down into several different areas under the Chief Technology Officer pillar within Defence Digital. I sit within the software house, and the software house is broken into two areas. One which is like people and people facing products, and then one which is capability facing. On the other side of the house, there's then the platforms, so things like the data analytics platform, things like the DevSecOps platform, some of the information platforms that some of our content sits within. But really for us, I think the key piece is around how do you enable that faster, more modern way of working? I think a big piece is around we have a small team of teams approach with some in-house permanent resource that is a mixture, blend of military, civil servant, and then some sort of permanent contracted leadership within it. And then we have a contracted mechanism out to multiple different industry partners to bring in some of that expertise around, whether they're front-end engineers, whether they're AI, data engineers, engineers, or we need user researchers, UX UI designers, the likes goes with it. The big piece, I think, over the last two and a bit years that I've been in the Foundry, and then the sort of 3 that I was in Navy Digital before that, the key really has been around, I suppose, probably 3 or 4 things. The first being that there is an alignment to the vision and the mission that you're after. You need to have, and you need to keep going back to the activities that you're doing. Are they in context to that strategic vision and that mission that you go with? And is everyone bought into that? So, having the culture that within your team that enables you to continue to reflect back to that, I think is key. I also have always advocated for a team of teams approach. And what I mean by that is having, a team that's looking at discovery activity, a team that might be looking at sort of actually doing the development piece, another team that's looking at live service management and the continuous service improvement cycle that goes with it, but also having flexible resources that you can move in and out, so that, for example, if you're moving through a discovery period of sort of experimentation and understanding, and you need to pull in more of, a data engineer or an AI prompt engineer, you can pull those people in quickly for a couple of weeks and run through a couple of sprints, and then move them out into a different area where they're back doing live service management or continuous service improvement. Another big thing is empowerment. Some of the bureaucracy within and some of the sort of politics within defense, as it is with every big organization, we need to be able to get sort of quickly stuff not necessarily approved, but have empowerment to make those decisions on a day by day, week by week basis, and then move forward against having that piece. And that's been something that I think has been slightly different to the wider defense piece. We talk about empowerment and leadership and responsibility, delegation quite a lot, but actually being truly empowered to spend what is sometimes quite large budgets against what is organizational, or more importantly, the user need that comes out of it is there. But the one key piece, and I've spoken about this several times, that I believe is truly required for successful multidisciplinary teams, whether that's managing a dozen teams or 2 teams, is having trust. So having the transparency, having the trust, having the each voice is listened to and known, and being able to have that, whether that's retros, whether that's in the design periods, whether that's just on a day-to-day stand-up, is absolutely key, and that's where the success comes.
That's really interesting, because these are some of the things that we talk about all the time with regard to regulated industries that are more customer centric. So legal and financial services, and they struggle with the same things, compliance, cutting through red tape, legacy technology, empowerment. And it really resonated with me when I know you recently published a blog post on is it called the My Defense blog?
Yeah.
There's a bit in there, and I don't know, I haven't had time to look up the Haythornthwaite review, but there's a quote that you use from it in there that just resonates so much with the problems that we see large companies or large organizations dealing with on a day-to-day basis. It says, instead of having the freedom to give their best for the people working with and for them, people feel disempowered by a system that swamps them with rules and process rather than embracing ideas and initiative. In short, people's expectations and ability, shaped by a world that is changing with unprecedented pace, has moved on, but the way service personnel are incentivized and managed has not. And this is something that I imagine is perhaps, or was, worse in the armed forces than you might get in a large financial services company. So how much has it changed, I guess, is the question. And how have you helped guide that change, and how is it still evolving?
The Haythornthwaite review last year very much looked at incentivization around, why are people not joining the armed forces, and then also the retention piece around, why are people ultimately leaving. I joined 21 years ago, and people aren't joining anymore for, let's say, a 20-year career. It seems to be more transient, and it seems to be more, and I don't know whether it's generational or not, but when you look at the report, it's very much people aren't joining the military to go and spend, the next 50% of 5 years constantly away deployed with it. They want to have the flexibility of a family and being able to be essentially located in different areas. And that doesn't necessarily resonate with, the way that the military has worked over the last couple of decades. The big piece for me is around how do we harness digital approaches, transformational activities, introduction of new technologies in a way that makes people feel valued and empowered. And I think that's the key. How do you bring in, easy applications on people's phones that if they live in service family accommodation, that they can quickly register and say, well, we've got a leak in a pipe, and they can get an automated response coming back saying you've had an engineer get it to you. They'll be there in 35 minutes. The same kind of experience that you get outside of the military, we don't have that, and the report very clearly articulates, that we're quite archaic in some of those approaches and some of those processes, and we need to modernize. So we got together as a group back in March. I say we got together in a group. I was lucky enough to be asked to be part of a group really focused on how do we drive towards some of the pain points that we need to address. So engineers is a big one. We don't have enough engineers, and we can't retain enough engineers across the entire armed forces. So how do we look at using technologies and digital transformational activities to try and streamline some of the processes so that they feel more valued? How do we take more novel approaches with fundings or bonuses or additional ability to provide leave days, holiday days and things like this that make people feel like they're getting rewarded for the sometimes fairly extensive time away or long hours that they're being asked to work. So that came in several different initiatives. My Defence, I know we'll talk about a bit more, is one of those. Like, how can you empower people through their personal devices to conduct activities ranging from ordering their uniform and picking it up from the gate as they leave on their day, all the way through to being able to have a look and plan their next role, because military people obviously rotate jobs every 2 to 4 years. Therefore, there's obviously always friction around what does that mean for people's families? What does that mean for position in the area that you live in? Kids' schools, all these kind of things. So yeah, we've been driving several initiatives towards that.
That sort of people first culture in yesteryear wasn't central to the processes that have been built up within the armed forces. How much do you find that people-centric philosophy comes at sort of loggerheads with legacy compliance and process, and what would have, I suppose, everything would have been built around efficiency rather than people, and now we, just like in companies, we know that the two go hand in hand.
I think we differ, but also we're similar to some of those wider industries. If I use the defence is still a victim of that hippo mindset. For those, if you don't know, so the highest paid person in the room is the person that has the best idea or is the most informed. And I think because we have such a rigid rank structure, there is this assumption that the most senior person in the room is the most intelligent, the most informed, the best all around. And I do think that is changing. 20 years ago, that was probably far more the case. I do think there is a change in defence around understanding, and some of those senior leaders, and very much leaders rather than managers, they understand that the room of experts that they have needs to be relied upon, and some of the best need to understand that. That comes hand in hand then with, if they are listening to those experts, then those experts are advising them that, rather than focusing constantly on, and let's take digital transformation in its entirety, if it's purely around organizational benefit, and that's what you focus it on, and you don't think about user-centered design or the people that need to do it, you end up, and we have been a victim of several very, expensive, very, what was seen at the time, good initiatives to bring in new software or platforms, and there's been no adoption because they've not actually been what the people have wanted or needed, and therefore you find them being used for the the minimal requirement that they have to be, but they've not been adopted and utilized and iterated accordingly. And over the last, COVID and the lockdown very much catalyzed this, but I think there was a drive towards it even before in sort of 2018-19 around providing more people-focused services. And actually, when you invest in understanding user needs and doing user research, which wasn't being done in some areas and still isn't being done in some areas, if you understand the people and you understand what actually they need to get out of it, and you understand the problem space that you're trying to address by the new platform, the new piece of software, the new modified process, then when you release that or you try to introduce it, very quickly the adoption is far more positive and you have a much greater uptake rate, which means then that you have greater insight being fed back through into the teams that are designing it or that have built it, and therefore you can continue to make it better for our people. And that was what we had huge success with MyNavy as a platform, which was that first sort of, let's say, combined application platform, which allowed people through their personal devices to conduct some of those sort of contextual, let's call them high frequency, low complexity, tasks on a day-to-day basis.
And in terms of the development of these platforms, are you borrowing from tech a lot more, as in the tech sector a lot more? I'm thinking agile, and you mentioned user-centric design. In terms of something like agile, it's quite difficult to apply an iterative process against that friction that compliance can create sometimes. Is that something that you come across?
I think it's something we've been very successful in cutting through over the last few years. We do still come across it, obviously. There is still that sort of direction that comes down that this is how it must be, and it takes a while to go through the channels of bureaucracy to get certain things addressed. But I think we are cutting through that on a much better manner. I mean, I use an example. I'm sure the retired Admiral Hines won't mind me saying this. We had the previous second Sea Lord, Admiral Hines, who's now retired. I got brought together as a group where he came in, and it was very clearly I want an Amazon delivery service for uniform. So you can imagine in defence, and this is across the Army, Navy, Air Force and Civil Service, people have to walk to a store which has no digital systems apart from potentially a scanning gun to take it off their inventory does, stand in a queue for sometimes like half an hour, 40 minutes to then get to it and say, oh, can I have a new set of overalls or a new shirt to wear for my job, which is mandatory, and then to be told, oh, we don't have your size, you can have 2 sizes bigger or 1 size smaller, pick it. And you say, well, when's the size going to get in? Oh, it might be next week. You go away, you come back, you repeat the process next week, and it's all around wasting time. So he came in and he said, I want a Amazon delivery service for uniform. And of course, very quickly people said, was that what the people want, or is that what you want? And you've had a conversation, and there was very little back and forth. It was, this is the directive, go away and tell me how you can provide me an Amazon delivery service for uniform for the Navy in the next 4 weeks. It was over an Easter break period, so it was probably actually about 10 working days worth of it. We went to Amazon, asked them how much it would cost if we gave them all of their uniform. A lot of money, just under 10 million, I think it was, on an annual basis. That wasn't very sustainable. Also, we had relationships with other companies that we couldn't get out of anyway. But actually, more importantly, we went and spoke to the stores and said, what are the issues you have with the stores? What do the people want? We went and spoke to people who are deployed, people who are coming back on ship on a Friday, and they'd love to be able to order their uniform and pick it up on the gate as they leave the establishment to go home for the weekend. And what became very clear was, people don't want an Amazon delivery service for uniform. They want the flexibility and empowerment to order their uniform through a personal or through a device that's accessible to them all the time, understand whether the store that they're at has their size, or whether they need to go to a different establishment on the way home or somewhere else to get it, and then be able to pick it up at a time that is convenient and relevant to them. Or we go further, which some RAF bases went as this scaled out to the RAF as a solution, where they've just employed Amazon-style delivery lockers that you just go to whenever you want to pick up your uniform. And we went back and proposed it, and we were waiting for the massive backlash of, no, I asked for an Amazon delivery service. But if you can articulate to these senior people, whether it's in a wider, bigger organization, this was your great idea, fully get that. We've then gone and spoken to the people, the stores, all of the different user communities that are going to use something like this. And actually, that's not what they want. What they want is this. And we've come up with a plan to do a rapid, iterative development, release, and then sort of cyclical, cycle to understand how this is a new service to the armed forces needs to be done. We then got back, you need to do it in 12 weeks. So we delivered it in 12 weeks. And to do that, we had to cut through some of the red tape and bureaucracy. We still abided by all of the security parameters and the standards and the accreditation and the sort of different authentication mechanisms that needed doing. But what you got in 12 weeks was the beginning of the journey. And I think that's different. It's that product mindset rather than project, because the project was get to something live, brilliant, and about 3/4 of the supporting team, let's say, disappeared. What the software team that worked for me at the time, or the teams that worked for me at the time then did, was we had a really clear path for the next 6 to 12 months that involved scaling it to the RAF and including all of them, and then scaling out to more and more and more stores, including reserve stores. And what is that? And what's the impact that has? Going back to that Hawthorne Thwaite report and the empowerment and value that people have. If you have, say, an army trainee doctor who's working in Liverpool Hospital doing his surgery training to become a vascular surgeon, he might be actually owned by an establishment in Catterick. Does he want to travel to Catterick to get a set of uniform, or does he want to order it on his phone and pick it up from the reserve unit that's 5 minutes round the corner from Liverpool Hospital? The answer is fairly obvious, and that's what we enabled him to do, or them to do, or she to do, just through sort of simple adoption of some of the best industry practices that should be done, and focusing on that UCD approach.
And a 12-week development cycle is fast, and you're not just focusing on these users and this behavior and this problem. You're delivering software for different teams, different purposes, different journeys, different behaviors across the defences. It's mad. And so I would guess, going back to users every single time you start the development process or a project. But like you said, you mentioned authentication there, things like authentication, there's a foundation that you've built out that will be used across many different projects and platforms. How much are you deciding when to create, foundational layers of tech that can be repurposed and reused versus, single use applications or single purpose applications?
That's a great question. I'm a great fan of owning and having the skill sets in-house to have a custom code solution. I'm not naive enough to think that doesn't need to be dovetailed into some of the IBPM offerings that already exist out there. But we often have found, and I'm sure this is the same for within industry, if you have an area that doesn't necessarily have the capabilities to be able to support that, the simple, most effective way is, what can I buy off the shelf that provides me maybe 60% of the solution I'm looking for? The difficulty of that is trying to bespoke or tailor that sometimes isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do, or comes at a fairly significant cost. What we made the decision to do way back in 2019, and again, it wasn't me, I can't claim it, but the teams that were way before me did it, was how can I build a foundation so we have something called the Defence Gateway, which at the moment provides the authentication layer to do so, and we have a team in the Army that continue to support and deliver that. That's become a foundational platform for that area. We have a data fabric and a data mesh, which is now a standardized piece, which allows us to reuse that as a data broker constantly to be able to do so. We have invested, and specifically over 2021, 22, we really invested in trying to make interfaces, whether that's for an operational, deployed onboard a ship interface that you see, all the way through to something that someone's ordering their uniform through on their phone. We really tried to focus on that UCD approach and utilizing best practices within it, and coming up with a standardized design system for defense, which is industry customer facing, world class from a user perspective. And that came at some friction. I'm not going to lie. There was a lot of people that was like, well, why does the gray and black box thing that everybody uses, why do we need to change that? It's mandatory. Everyone has to use it. People understand it. They get it, and you go, do they get it? Or are they just forced to use it and they actually only use about 20% of it because it's not very intuitive and half the people don't understand, where you would go to fully utilize that piece of software. For me, I personally think Defence has done the right thing in investing in some of that custom code solution that provides you that front end interaction layer. But I think it has to be then paired with, hundreds of systems behind it. And some of them are going to be IBPM offering systems, whether that's from Oracle that we have large, systems with, whether that's Salesforce, ServiceNow, to name a few. But again, we've got to provide something that is almost plug and play, that has the ability to interact with them and surface it in a way that is secure by design, in a way that utilizes our DevSecOps platforms and it's containerized, and therefore we have the additional levels of understanding and security that goes with it, but also focuses on providing that consumer grade experience, which therefore then provides greater utility of those services by what I call my customers, but also the personnel of defense.
So this is very much related to the project that you've been working on over the last couple of years, the My Defence initiative, and this project to build a consumer grade experience that is accessible by all these different people, family members, personnel, civil servants, etc. What can regulated sectors, or I guess companies in other regulated sectors, learn from the challenges that you've come across and how you've solved them through that project?
So I think I would start with what are the efficiencies in things like onboarding, and I'll start with so Virgin as a company, for example, they have a very user-friendly, a very standardized interface and design system. And whether that's the person in a warehouse inventory utilizing and doing stock, all the way through to, Virgin Atlantic pilots receiving, tasking information and the likes goes with it. They've taken that approach. The same as a customer facing, you take something like Aviva as an insurance company, whether it doesn't matter what kind of insurance you're taking out. It doesn't matter whether there's 25 different subsystems behind it that are feeding it. That you see that one interface, and you've installed that one application on your phone that allows you to go back and forth through either native application services or back into web-facing application services. And it's about creating that seamless user journey, which doesn't require vast quantities of training, because the real value for me, and I'm striving towards that recruit to veteran space, and we're not there. It's going to take a few years to get there, and I won't see it in my career. But how do you, if you're thinking about joining the military and you go to the website and you have a look at it and you're interested with it, and you download something that looks and feels one way and it gives you a bit more information, a bit of training, a bit of pre-thing, and then you apply to join the army. All the way through the application process, you still use the same tool, and there's just more capability as you join. You get a login, therefore it adds more capability and products inside that sort of ecosystem to you. And then all the way through your career, same interface, same instructions. The myriad of different services beneath the surface doesn't really matter. The value of that is that from day one, people understand it. They don't have to have training on how to use it. It's very intuitive. You go back to, people when they install WhatsApp, there's not a 20-minute tutorial video to work out how to use WhatsApp. It's very intuitive. And that's the approach we've had to take with it. So the value in that is you're removing the friction or the stresses around onboarding. So new people coming in. So I say onboarding rather than joining the service from a relevance perspective, but new people joining an organization, if from day one, it's similarity. Therefore, the adoption and the utility of those software and services and processes will be far greater, and you have that. So you can save money and efficiency from an onboarding perspective. You also have huge value in reuse. So if you need to design and build a new product based off a new problem set or a new question that's been asked, you have the ability to very quickly reuse and build at scale. So reuse of code, reuse of APIs, reuse of UX UI from a design perspective. There's all that piece. So therefore, it provides huge commodity and efficiency in that perspective. And the other thing is around the value people have. So I've been recently doing some work with the RNLI, and they have a very similar issue that they've got. So RNLI, Royal Lifeboat Institute, they have volunteers that work obviously in lifeboat stations. They have people that work doing volunteers trying to gain charity donations. They have people that work permanently around the engineering and organizational piece with it. They've got something like 28 different applications that all look and feel very, very different. So if you start in one area and you move to another, it's basically like starting a new job, even though you're moving across, or you move up in seniority and you're required to manage and run 2 or 3 additional services. It's a huge training burden to understand moving forward. So they're talking about trying to do something very similar, which is how do I bring all of those together under one umbrella? So not one app to rule them all, but how do you have one interface or one platform that is consistent from a UX UI perspective and consistent from a people centricity perspective that delivers an experience which is consistent, but also underneath it has all of the systems and services that delivers the consistency from an organizational output that is required. And that would be, I suppose, my 10 pence for what you can learn from doing that approach and what the efficiencies can be gained.
You say that won't happen within your time. What will happen within your time? What are you excited about? Just to wrap up here, what are you excited about over the next sort of 3 years, 5 years? AI, low code, no code, advanced analytics, all of that stuff. What's most exciting as it relates to what your projects you're working on at the moment?
So I think when I say not in my time, weirdly, there isn't a digital profession within defence, and therefore, for people like, I'm now leaving and moving into industry over the next 6 months. What will happen over that time is we will set the foundation for building the My Defence piece. We've already built out the design system. It's been adopted and is going to be utilised by over a dozen different projects and programs over the next 12 months. So that consistency will be implemented in there, and then the platform is then, fingers crossed, will be built out in the next 12 months, and we will have alignment then within the three sort of single services: Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Civil Service and the Reserves, all under that one banner, that one umbrella, and then hopefully within the next 2 to 3 years scale that out to include recruits, to include veterans, to include family members if needed from that family support piece. So I was lucky enough to listen to a professor an engineering professor from Columbia last year in California talk about AI and the 6 waves of AI. Now you hear, and everything is evolving, around generative AI at the moment. I think what I'm excited about is that defense has been quite, not necessarily resistant, but the pockets that have been adopting and playing with utilizing cognitive or generative AI have been quite isolated in very small pieces. I see huge expansion across defense in that under the Defense AI unit and the Defense Innovation Unit, where we should be able to, we're working with Microsoft around Copilot, and we should be utilizing those in a day-to-day manner. The industry's been doing probably for the last 18 months, 2 years since it came about, and has invested heavily in really experimenting and playing with all of the different, month by month, new generative AI capabilities that are being, released around the world from OpenAI through to all the key players that are doing that. So I think there's definitely going to be a wave of utilization of it, but I think we're going to have to culturally get over the fear and skepticism and stress of it. And I think there's a really important cultural piece within defense, which is around people seeing it as opportunity, this integration of new emerging technologies. So I think that's there. And there's also a huge expansion in naturally autonomous and autonomy and drone technologies. But more importantly, rather than individual drones doing certain things, having drones in clusters and in swarms, being able to do it with data being fed back into that data fabric. So for me, within the next couple of years, there's going to be a far more connected environment that allows, far more effective utility of not just new expanding areas of robotics and autonomy and drone technologies and RPAS, but also the fact that that's plugged into the wider network and the utility of the data analytics. And with it, I think we're probably a way off, really harnessing things like quantum, just because we don't have the foundational platform and architecture in place yet to really harness that. But again, that will start to come over the next sort of, I think, 5 to 8 years. But yeah, excited about how I think the mindset has changed over the last probably 2 to 3 years. There seems to be the right leadership in the right areas that really are, rather than there being the inevitable security blockers to integrating some of these or playing or experimenting with some of these emerging technologies, we've got the right people in the right places that are allowing us to do so. And areas like the Defence Digital Foundry, which are trying to move at pace and be a bit more innovative, alongside the single service software houses and innovation hubs, are managing to have more freedom and more empowerment to really try and utilize these aspects. Because if you go back to the Hawthorne Fit report, if we can't retain and we can't recruit enough, then the only way that we're going to be able to continue to protect our nation and to deliver the outputs of defense is by more novel ways of adoption of these emerging technologies moving forward.
I think that's a very good thinking point to end on. You say you're moving into industry. If people do want to get in contact with you for help, to ask you any questions, where can they find you?
Just hit me up on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to do it. I've got a fairly decent presence with that. Morgan Mogsy. I'm known fairly universally as Mogsy as a nickname given to me when I started my career running around with the Marines quite a lot over the first 6 years, and it's stuck ever since. So find me on LinkedIn, connect with me, follow me, and more than happy to engage with conversation as needed moving forward.
Great stuff. Morgan Mogsy, thank you very much for your time. We'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you for the opportunity, Sam.